Now, I want to go back into the idea of genealogy because, again, as I mentioned, I'm obsessed. You're obsessed. We're really really into this. Now, the people who are they're just getting their very first account. Let's just say ancestry.com because it's the most common. Although the Family Search, I believe it's familysearch.org. That's the one owned by the LDS Church, and they have people all over the planet contributing. Let's talk a bit about the accuracy of these sites, because I know familysearch.org, anybody can change your tree and they might not have accurate information. And Ancestry gives you the little green hints, which may not be accurate. So let's give a few pointers.
Oh, sure. You always want to see records. And if I totally dating myself, you do research, it's on a microfilm machine and you're cranking, looking for somebody. They're very hard to read. And so even on Ancestry, which I know really does try and be accurate, it's a human looking at that 100, 200-year-old document, trying to read it. And in my own family, I've seen one of the family names spelled so many times, I can't even tell you. Or they may think an F is a T, or an F, a little F is an S. So, I mean, you're relying on transcriptionists. So, always take what you're seeing with a grain of salt, because unless you have that original document in your hands, which most of us never will, we don't know. Plus, with censuses, and in the US, they were done every 10 years since 1790, you can have somebody coming to the door asking about where were your parents born? Oh gosh, I think they were born in Kentucky. I'm not sure. So, they could have been born in Ohio. We don't know. So we don't know how accurate that information is. That's why if you're doing research, you really want to use as many records as you can. Just like in tarot, you're building a picture. So if the census says one thing, a death certificate says something else, birth certificate says something else, you're going to go to secondary sources. And I also want to say, just as the death certificate tip, somebody in the family is giving that information. Think about I don't know if your parents are living, but think about when your mom passed away. Don't ask me really hard questions, because I'm in such grief. And yet that's what they did. They ask a family member. So are we going to trust their memory about their mom's maiden name? No, I don't know. So get multiple sources.
Yeah, that's a really good point right there. I've got a perfect example. My great grandma, who I'm like really, really into researching, her headstone in the cemetery has her birth date wrong by like a year and 3 days. So it's a completely different person. I mean, if I look, I also do astrology. I pull astrology reports for people if I can find their time of birth. So that bit of information was negated when I looked up her birth record on the official record site, Scotland's People, and I saw, oh, this is, yes. So yes, you got to look for those records and don't just trust the family memories. That's a really good point. But I think this also brings us back to what we were talking about whether you're trusting solid information for validation or whether you can trust your intuition, because as we said, genealogy research is an imperfect science. Divination is an intuitive science. So merging of the two, how do you feel comfortable in dealing with the unknowns?
I think if you do genealogy or ancestral tarot, honestly, you're always dealing with unknowns. You are always having to get as much information as you can, but there, again, that level of trust always has to come in. So, with your person and this, where'd you go? Scotland's People? Is that what you said? Yeah. And so did you have a third place to go, or did you intuitively think, oh yeah, this one's right? Is there another source I need to find out? because as you know, in Britain, all of those, a lot of those records were parish records. They were kept in a church. So who was writing down that stuff? How good was he? So we're walking this very thin line between very finite, accurate information and trusting our intuition. And I think we do that in genealogy and tarot all the time. I think it's just life as we know it.
Yeah, just don't make any definitive statements and allow yourself the luxury of a little leeway.
And I think that's very true. We have to be willing to be wrong and be willing to trust.
And again, if we were wrong, that I look at it as that's what I needed to see at that moment, and then it was corrected later.
And that's really true, because how I would solve a problem today is very different from how I would solve a problem 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So we are in a constant state of growth, and we hear the message. I just talked to you about Ancestral Tarot, the book. I feel like that was a book I was born to write. I could not have written that book 10 years ago. I needed the culmination of my life to this point to write that book. So, we have to go with where we are at the moment. And I think the ancestral messages that come through tell us what they know we can do today. Because if I told you, you've got to do X, Y, Z, but in your heart, you're not ready to do that, then, that message has no meaning for you. Doesn't for me anyway.
Right. Yeah. And here's just another example for 2/3 of my life, my mom misremembered what time I was born. So she told me I was born at like 3:30 a.m. So, I look up my astrology chart and it shows my rising sign is this. And then, I don't know, 40 years later, I find my birth certificate, the actual document, and it shows that I was born at 1:23 a.m., which changes my rising sign and changes my entire chart. And so I've been laboring under the misconceptions that this is who the stars say I am. And, it really did. It was helpful information to me. But then when I discovered that was inaccurate, it completely shifted my view of myself. And again, I realized that for those years, I needed to see myself this way. And then I could see this other.
Right.
aspect.
Absolutely. I agree. It is kind of strange, those things that moms remember, because my mom would always say about my sister, I could hear the church bells ringing. Oh, okay. What time were the church bells ringing? But the moms have their own memories. I've already said this, so I'll repeat myself. Be willing to just hear, be willing to trust what you're hearing. And if the action does not feel right to you, don't do it. We are humans with free will. And, we may have an ancestor who can see way further down the road than we can. And they may know that outcome, and they may know the best way to get you there quickly. But maybe you're just not in that space. So that might be a right action for you in the grand scheme of life, but it's not the right action today. Again, doing this work, you really learn to trust yourself. And trust me, if I tell you, your intuition can really bloom during ancestral healing, because you are constantly listening for messages. You're constantly trusting the cards you draw or the cards you're meant to draw. And, again, ask for proof. I'm a big believer in asking for proof, like the $50. And I'll give you one more quick example since we're running out of time. I said to one of my ancestors, if what you're saying is true, I will see a lion this week. And I promised I would not go to the San Diego Zoo and look at a lion. So I was at my sister's house the next day. I was on the floor playing with my great nephew. who at that time was 3. And he reached into his toy box and he pulled a toy lion out and stuck it up in my face. So ask for those signs. Ask for the signs, and you'll see if it's true or not.
I love those kinds of signs. They're the kinds that just give you goosebumps and make you go.
I know, it's like, oh my God, there's the lion.
Well, I want to make sure that before we wrap this up, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that's brewing, or that I've maybe forgotten to ask?
Well, I do want to say one thing about ancestral healing. If you can work with family patterns, because generally speaking, and I'm not going to get into positive family patterns because most people experience negative ones. If you can identify something in your life that's just not working, and try and use tarot to find out where that pattern started in your family, and then begin to work with it, I cannot tell you the amount of healing that takes place. It's mind-boggling to me how well that works and the healing that can take place, because I have so many people who will say, I never thought that I could break this pattern. I never thought I would love my family. I never thought I'd be connected. And the amount of healing in family patterns, especially intergenerational family patterns, is just incredible. So do that work. Do that work. It's so amazing.
Thanks for listening. Check out Castle Gate, a novel based on my own ancestral healing journey, at lisabonis.com. In 1921, 4 men set off from Scotland to the United States. Will Garrock, his brother Pete, his son Willie, and his nephew Thomas, all coal miners. They left behind the miners' rows and the nationwide mining strike with its soup kitchens. Their destination was Castlegate, Utah, where they had kin to welcome them before sending for their wives and children. They prospered in America, working in one of the finest mines in Utah. Until that tragic day, March 8th, 1924. Disaster struck. 3 explosions, trapping 171 men inside. Rescue crews worked tirelessly for days, but sadly, they could not save a soul. Women were widowed and children were orphaned, and some never recovered from their broken hearts. Castlegate is the true and tragic saga of a Scottish family whose dreams of finding their fortunes in the bountiful coal mines of Castlegate, Utah during the Prohibition era explode in one of the most devastating mine disasters in American history. Learn more at lisabonis.com.